For 2 winters, Russian missiles and drones have been hammering Ukraine's power plants, substations, and transmission lines, trying to freeze entire cities into submission. This week, the pattern flips. Instead of Ukrainians sitting in cold, dark apartments, some of the deepest and most coordinated Ukrainian strikes of the war are now hitting Russia's own power grid, leaving millions of Russians without light, heat, or running water. And the way Ukraine does it shows that the energy war inside this conflict is entering a new phase. Millions of Russians in the cold and dark. The first wave comes from Ukraine's first separate center of unmanned systems. Using long-range drones, they hit a string of military facilities, logistics hubs, and power infrastructure in the Russian-controlled part of the Donetsk region. Among the key nodes struck are the Zora 110 kV substation, the Volnovakha traction substation that feeds the rail network, and the Pivnana 330 kV substation. The drones don't arrive all at once. They come in sequential waves, forcing Russian defenders to react again and again, and amplifying the disruption to both the regional grid and rail traffic around Donetsk. Almost in parallel, a second axis opens up over the border in the Belgorod region. There, Ukrainian forces launch a salvo of 14 HIMARS missiles. Russian reports claim that 8 of them reach their targets, but even by that account, the damage is significant. At the Luch combined heat and power plant, a transformer is destroyed, while a nearby pipeline and administrative buildings are damaged. At the same time, the 330 kV Belgorod substation catches fire and is knocked offline, dragging down 28 smaller substations that depend on it. What starts as a strike on a handful of sites ripples outward into a regional blackout. The numbers that follow underline the scale. After the nighttime attacks, around 556,000 residents are left without electricity and heating. Roughly 200,000 people lose access to the water supply. Major disruptions are recorded in internet connectivity as well, with broad outages reported across Belgorod after the strikes. The same tactics Russia has used to darken Ukrainian cities are now being mirrored back across the border, and ordinary Russians are the ones finding their radiators cold and taps dry. These attacks don't come out of nowhere. They are framed as a direct response to Russia's winter campaign against Ukraine's energy system, which has already inflicted heavy damage this season. Across Ukraine, rolling blackouts are now a part of daily life. In some areas, the lights go out for several hours. In places hit directly, power cuts can stretch close to a week. At any given moment, large numbers of Ukrainians are living without reliable electricity, heating, or water. Against that backdrop, Kyiv's decision not to let up, but instead to widen its own energy offensive, is a signal that the contest over critical infrastructure is no longer one-sided. The follow-on strikes broaden both the geography and the list of targets. In the Donetsk region, Ukraine hits the 330 kV Kartiska substation, causing further blackouts and serious voltage drops across the area. Coordinated with the attacks around Belgorod, Ukrainian forces also target a thermal power plant in the city of Oryol. The blast there reportedly causes major damage and knocks out power to parts of the city. Additional explosions are reported in Novokirkatsk after Ukrainian drones attack another thermal plant. In incident after incident, fires break out and burn for hours, while engineers are still trying to assess how badly the facilities have been hit. The pattern extends deeper into Russia's interior. Ukrainian drones ignite an energy facility in the village of Kamatuvka in the Kursk region, leading to a partial blackout that leaves 115 settlements without power. Another Ukrainian operation uses a swarm of roughly 40 UAVs to strike the town of Moto near Moscow. That attack triggers widespread outages across much of the town, disrupts a key water pumping station, causes interruptions to district heating, and even forces flight cancellations at Vnukovo Airport. The message is that even areas once considered far from the front are now within reach of Ukraine's unmanned systems. And this is not the first blow to the Moscow region. Prior to the Moto strike, Ukrainian drones had already managed to cut power to more than 600,000 people in and around the capital. Russian authorities rushed dozens of mobile generators to apartment complexes in the Romansky district to stabilize the grid. A visible reminder to residents that what had been an abstract, distant war now has very concrete effects in their own neighborhoods. Taken together, the choice of targets shows a clear logic. Ukrainian strikes concentrate on Russian-controlled Ukrainian territories and the adjacent regions inside Russia itself. The goals are explicitly twofold. The first is to degrade Russian military operations. By attacking energy assets and the infrastructure that supports transmission, Ukraine aims to undercut Russia's ability to maintain command networks, logistics chains, and force deployment. Units that cannot rely on stable electricity are forced onto generators and battery-powered systems, stopgap solutions that are loud, fuel-hungry, and vulnerable, and that shorten the time a unit can operate effectively. The second goal is to push the hardest consequences of the energy war closer to Russian civilians. Parts of the Russian public have openly supported the idea of Ukrainians freezing in the dark. By bringing blackouts, heating failures, and water cuts into border regions, and even the outskirts of Moscow, Ukraine is trying to ensure those costs are no longer invisible inside Russia. In theory, the more ordinary residents feel the disruption, the harder it becomes for the political leadership to present this as a low-cost campaign against someone else's infrastructure. Overall, over the past month, Ukraine has sharply intensified its attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, inflicting the broadest and most varied damage to these systems since the start of the full-scale invasion. The operations complicate Russian military planning, impose fresh economic losses through repair costs and industrial downtime, and increase pressure on millions of Russian civilians who are now experiencing the flip side of the tactics used against Ukraine. How Moscow chooses to respond, whether by escalating further, hardening its grid, or adjusting its strategy, will shape the next phase of this energy war within the war, and it's a trend that will continue to redraw the map of who sits in the dark as winter goes on.